Hello and welcome to some late thoughts further on United's loss to Man City earlier today or yesterday, depending on your time when you're watching it. I've been trying to comprise and compile how I feel about this game and where I'm at. And for me, at the moment, I feel a lot more negative about it than I should, but probably for different reasons. And I do find this part of the discussion funny, and I find it interesting because I'm essentially on the same page as a lot of people right now with their concerns on manager, on things like that, but ultimately for very, very different reasons. My view of managers and all of it is that ultimately the manager is responsible for, in my opinion, less than what most people kind of say that they're responsible for. I think very often, people act as if everything that happens on the pitch is the fault of the manager. Whereas the way I see it is that at the end of the day, a manager is really responsible for a few things. One of them, and the primary thing that they're responsible for, is putting out the best team to win a game. Getting the best team to win a game, the best players together in the right setting where they suit each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they work together to perform. I think ultimately that's mostly it. Get them to do that. Put the right people out, get them to do it. I thought that, for example, the biggest mistake, for let's say Ten Hag made, is that he spent a lot of time picking really crap decisions, putting players in bad positions, and greater than all of that, his profiling of players was horrendous. What he wanted in the market and all of that was truly, to me, terrible. Whereas I take Solskjaer, and I actually thought he was building a really nice, cohesive team of matching profiles, but his idea was minimalistic. His idea was maybe not good enough. So you have the system. Is it good enough? It's hard to know. There's a lot of good systems, a lot of bad systems. Football changes. Sometimes the system goes in and out of style. Sometimes ways of playing go in and out of style, and all of that changes. You could go and play a 4-4-2 now, the way Sir Alex played, and people would say is hoofball too often. You know what I mean? You could. It's hard to know. Things change on that front, but we've gone through so many systems, and that hasn't really resolved it. But that's one. Maybe the system isn't good enough. Maybe it is. I'll tell you what it's not. It's definitely not the reason we can't win games back to back on its own, the system. Because like someone pointed out, that system, and the same could go for Ten Hag for what it's worth. His system did well in Champions League, was able to do all sorts of stuff. So was Amorim's in different places and times, but it's not performing now. So to me, the system debate is kind of whatever. And I get that there's a debate about, all right, well, shouldn't you be playing into your players' strengths? And that kind of, to me, is where the crux of the argument goes. No, because if we're playing into our players' strengths, we would have built a team around Garnacho, Højlund, Bruno, Casemiro, and Luke Shaw and Diogo Dalot. Fuck that. Fuck that. No, absolutely not. We shouldn't just be playing into our players' strengths. We're trying to change. We're trying to change. And some of that means we're not playing into the strengths of all of our players because we're trying to build a new way of playing. Now, it should be borne in mind that the overall concept of building the team, I think, is there. And I think we're doing it better than we have before. When I look at all the profiles of players and things like that, I think we're building the right players. Cunha and Mbeumo and Šeško. I really liked Šeško again today. But Cunha, Mbeumo, Šeško, other players we want like Baleba, some of the midfielders and things that we're looking at, Lenny Yoro. There's a lot of really good ideas, really good players, and a lot of really good thoughts into the whole building of the team. So that part is fine. I think that in that part we're doing okay as we were in discussing the rebuild. And I think it's also manager agnostic. It's not so specific to a manager that if you make a change, you're in trouble later on. And you're going to have to rip it all up again. That part I really, really like. So where do I stand on this and what are my thoughts? I've been trying to narrow it down, and this is how I see it. Manager's responsible for the system. Okay. Amorim system. Is it good or bad? Honestly, I don't know. I like a lot of what I look at when I break down games. I'll break it down again tomorrow and see what I think. I like a lot of what I'm looking at. I like a lot of the things that it does, and I think it can actually match a very high intensity football. I watch our press, and even against City was actually really good, and that's frustrating because it's the first time we've had a good press in ages, and yet we suck. That sucks. That's frustrating to me. But the press, certain aspects of how it's organized are actually really, really good. So there's that aspect of it. I think it creates situations where we should be able to make better chances. I saw that through a lot of the first half. That's how I feel right now. I'll watch tomorrow. You're going to get varying opinions on this. I don't care. It's fine. You can think what you want about it. Doesn't really matter to me. Because I don't really think that's the issue. And that's why I say I could be at the other end of the spectrum with fans on this issue. The next thing is, can you communicate your ideas to the players? Are they getting what you want them to do? Right? Are they getting it? Are they looking at the game and to do what you want them to do? And my answer to that is, for the most part, I actually think yes. I think Ollie was really good at this, getting players to do what he wanted them to do, but his system was very mediocre. I think that Ten Hag was awful at getting players to do what he wanted to do, so he never knew if he even had a system because it was so chaotic so often that it was just crazy. Like, I never could figure out the actual patterns, and they changed game by game, and we knew that communication was an issue. I think Amram is communicating well and getting through, and I can see, like, the center backs kind of know what they're doing, and the wing backs know what they're doing, and the runs are there, and the play is there, and the whole ideas are there. And that brings me to the third point, which I think, again, to me is ultimately the biggest issue managers have, is their choices, their player selections. I think managers always have blind spots that they get wrong. And you say, oh, this is putting it on a player and taking it off the manager. No, because I think this is the biggest thing managers are responsible for at the end of the day, because they're not on the pitch. So all they really can do is pick the best 11 players to fit together to play on the pitch. That's it. And then in-game management, I'm counting as part of that. Picking the right teams, making the right adjustments in-game by adjusting the players, taking off players who are not performing, putting on ones who you think can add more, and utilizing the skill sets well. This isn't, to me, like I say, I think players are ultimately about 90% responsible for the game, and the manager is about 10%. But this 10% is big because it's what chooses which players are on the pitch, and I think that's the biggest factor. And when I look at this, I think that Ruben Amorim is ultimately making massive errors. And I've been saying this for a long time. It's the one thing I've had as a huge criticism of him, a huge worry. My biggest worry, even when I see positivity in other things, and like I said, I'm fine with system and stuff like that. This is just how I see football. Before the Europa League final, what did I say? I said there was 3 things he couldn't do in that game, and if he did, we would lose. Number 1, playing Casemiro and Bruno as a pivot in that big game. Cost us a goal. Number 2, Højlund couldn't score in 180 minutes. And number 3, Mazraoui at wingback. The problem that I have right now is he's doing the same thing. When I looked at Fulham and I reevaluated, I said, cool, I see what's going on here. What happened in this game? For the most part, Bruno lost his head against Fulham, wasn't making the passes, missed his penalties, was screwing it all up. And instead of just taking him off, he kept him on and wouldn't put Kabi on and started screwing with the whole midfield setup just to accommodate Bruno. And it got worse and worse, and we ultimately conceded and didn't go on to win. That sucks. That's a big error to me. Then I look at this game and I said before it, I said there was one thing selection-wise I really don't want him to do. Because we've seen, all right, Bruno and Casemiro could work at times. We've seen it in some decent games now that we've fixed a few other factors. But I said there's one thing, don't do it. Don't put Mazraoui at wing back. Don't put Mazraoui at right wing back, because it is such a huge pressure relief, and it's not Mazraoui's fault in this case, okay? Mazraoui doesn't... There was a moment over there where Mbeumo gets the ball, and like it takes Mazraoui ages to make that run beyond him to where he's not open anymore. And Mbeumo and Ahmad against Burnley had been really cooking, essentially, and starting to really get that in right. And you could see early on, Ahmad was kind of drifting that direction and almost creating chances. But we lost that. It's too defensive. Every time we do it, it gets worse. Every time we do it, we get worse and worse. Every time we do it, we fail. Every time it doesn't work, but he persists with doing it. You need to play attackers. Otherwise, it is too defensive, and you end up with not enough men forward. And kind of what I have in my head of the game is when we made a lot of good situations, we didn't have a lot of those 2v1s when I'm talking about Fulham and Burnley, where we had a lot of 2v1s up the side. We didn't have 2v1s. We only had 1v1s. Now, 1v1s are okay, but they're only okay against inferior teams. City is a good team. You can say we should be abusing. They still have really good players. You want to get man advantages. They beat us in a lot of 1v1s today. We lost the 2v1s because Mazraoui was there instead of Ahmad. That's just part of the game. That's just part of the fact that that's the way I see it. That's a huge mistake. The second thing is Bruno. And I'll never stop going on about this because it's just the way I see it. When I'm watching the players on the pitch, I think certain things are just not okay. Last year, Bruno was losing his head for the first months of the season and only got going by January. We can't afford that, but he's doing it again. He's doing it again. And I do not for 1 second buy this, oh, well, he's playing in the pivot. That's why he can't do basic functions correctly. You watch the passes Bruno misses, his missed possessions, his missed controls, his poor play. It's not forced errors. He's not being pressed into these mistakes. And I'll tell you exactly what he's doing that's wrong, which is totally on Amorim because he keeps picking him. Number one, the first goal only happens. It's 6v3. I went back and actually it's 8v4, I think is what it was. There's so many players around. Foden is sitting next to Bruno, walking, running, and then he just runs by him and Bruno's just walking. It's not because of pressing instructions. It's nothing. If you find yourself on the pitch, you have to chase your man. You have to mark the guy when a team is attacking you. You have to. You just have to. It has nothing to do with where you're being selected. It has nothing to do with tactics. It has nothing to do with it. That's basic football 101. Anybody denying that is silly. Erling Haaland made 6 clearances defensively because he was just doing the job. It's a defensive team effort. He pressed well. He did all sorts of things. It bothers me. You're in the midfield. If you played 4-3-3, you'd still have to track runners. I don't care. You know, if the only way Bruno Fernandes can play football is where he has 0 defensive responsibilities of any kind, then find another team because you're never going to have 0 defensive responsibilities at a Premier League team. It's not going to happen. That's it. It's not going to happen. He made huge errors there. But the biggest problem, and I'll look into this tomorrow because this is the thing that bothers me most, is that a lot of what was going on was the ball going out. When we'd get up towards attacking situations, Bruno would drift all the way wide, which I even pointed against Burnley worries me. Hit a poor cross in, which is a big part of it. Really poor execution of the crosses. Comes off the defender, and they're in on goal because the midfielder is moved all the way out wide to create when we don't need that. And my point is that if we needed that from Bruno, then great. But I don't think that football at the highest level needs everything running through one player where every week they're touching the ball most, they're lumping crosses in, they're sending it constantly. We've got Ahmad, we've got Mbumo, we've got all these players, and yet it's always going through Bruno Fernandes, and it's got to stop. We cannot do anything if that keeps happening. But if Amorim wants that, and he's okay with it, and he's unwilling to make substitutions, then that's what he's going to get. And if he's unwilling to sub him when he's poor and put Kobe on, then that's what he's going to get. And that's my biggest problem. It's not just Bruno. Luke Shaw, why does he not get subbed? There's too many times where I see players are underperforming, not doing it, and there's no consequence for those actions. That's my biggest problem, and I think Bruno's a big marker of that. When I say I want us to rebuild, I want us to become a team where all the creative burden is spread out, because that's how Amorim's system works. I watched it at Sporting for so many games. It didn't run like this. But he is the one, not Bruno, Amorim is the one making it run like that, because he's endorsing everything that happens by making the selections that he makes and does what he makes. And I think he's going to pick himself out of a job. So I have no confidence in him right now, not because of the system. System, players, choices. Systems, players, rebuild, choices. I think the system's fine. I think the players, in terms of how it's being built, is fine, but the choices are awful. And on that front, I think that's where it's really going wrong. Not the system. So different ends, same issue. Those are my thoughts today. We'll see tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a good night. See you later.